Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session about polymer and material design. I'm Martin Görner. I work for Google. And please welcome my guest star today, Cyril Balit.
Hello, Cyril Balit, and I work at SFEIR, a French society.
And so Cyril will be our standards man today, because yes, there are web standards that power this technology. But before we dive into web standards and Polymer and actual applications, one thing that I would like to show you is a few words about material design. You certainly heard about it already. What material design is a design philosophy. And really, it's more of a philosophy than a set of rigid rules. If you want to read about it, you go to google.com/design, and you have all the design documents there. To me, I like design, but to me, it reads like a novel. It's really inspirational. And to share a little bit of that with you, let's watch a short movie. All right, now you are all material design experts. No, just kidding. Let's see this again in slow motion and with the explanations. And let's cut the sound. That was nice, but... So, material design is based on a paper metaphor. The basic building block is this kind of magical piece of paper that can stretch, that can cut itself in pieces, and those pieces can flow to the front and go to the back again. They have this little drop shadow that makes them look like something you can actually touch and feel. So it's a very natural metaphor for presenting information. Next, we say that material design is bold, graphical, and intentional. What that means, let's rewind this just a little bit. Bold, graphical, intentional. What does that mean? Well, you will see a lot of colors. You will see a lot of big fonts. You will see kind of the minimal amount of information to understand what's going on. What this means in a nutshell is informational. You want your UIs to be informational. You want them to be glanceable. You want them to convey meaning at the first glance. Look what it does here. Color, red. Emergency, something bad happened. What happened? Little plane and the bridge in San Francisco. All right, flight to San Francisco. Something is bad with my flight. What is bad with my flight? Delayed. Okay, I get it. Everything on this little tile conveys the information I'm supposed to get, and there is nothing more. But it conveys the information through multiple channels, and a lot of them very, very visual, like color, picture, and so on. Now, look at this little button here. That's also a design pattern that you will see a lot in material design. That little dot, it's a call to action button. It's a button that is very visible in your UI and that holds the most frequent action the user will want to do in that context. It's called the floating action button. So as examples, here in an email application, for example, that would be the write new email button. Here in this contacts application, it would be the favorite contact button. But that's the idea. You not only want to present information, but stuff to do with it, and organize your UI so that the most frequent action is there, visible, and very easy to access for the user. All right, what else? Animations. You see this is animated a lot. Look at this little subtle interaction. When I touch something, there's this little ripple effect. And also, if you have seen on the tiles and buttons, there is something a little bit special. When you touch something, either it ripples or it comes to you. Again, that's very subtle, but this is to convey the fact that material design is a design philosophy that is mobile first. On the web, you click on something, it goes down. That's the paradigm. When you touch stuff, when you click on something, you want it to come to you, to see that it has reacted. So mobile first experience, and you want your interface to be really touchy-feely. Colors. Look at how colorful this is. So again, these colors, they come from the dominant color theme of the actual album art. Again, a design pattern you will find a lot in material design. In Lollipop, actually, there is a function, special function, to extract the dominant color from a picture so that you can implement this. So colors. And now look at this transition. Let's see it again. Here I'm in the list of albums. I click on an album and I go to the play this album view. Here. So you see the album art was in the list and is again in the details view. And the transition between those two views has kept a focus on that element. It's called the hero element. And a lot of the context switches that you will do in material design use this principle of a hero element to remind the user that he is switching contexts, but that he's now focusing on this piece of information. And still about animations. Now, this will be quick and really subtle, but I love this little animation. Look at the slider. Boom. Let's see it again. The volume slider. That's the one. So when this volume slider appeared, it appeared with a very subtle movement, which is barely visible, but still the user perceives it and understands that this control element is movable. That's, I think, a very relevant use of animation to show what is possible. And you will find that a lot in a material design as well. All right, what else did I forget? I think that is about it. So I actually have my magic paper, bold graphic, floating, touch first, contextual color, transitions, and meaningful animations. Those are the big elements in material design. If you want to know more, really, google.com/design. And so now we will switch to Polymer and web components. Polymer and web components are technologies for creating components for the web. And I'll show you later, we have published a series of components using the material design principles, and those are called the paper components. But before we can play with them, a few words about the actual web standards that are there underlying these components and these technologies. So let me switch to Cyril's presentation. Please, Cyril.
Okay, thank you, Martin. This is important because you heard a lot about Polymer, and it's important to make the focus on the fact that Polymer is not web components, it's built up the web components. So I'll try to show you today what is behind the buzzword web component. So first, let me ask you a question. Why do we want to use web component? In fact, the answer is pretty simple because it's something we already do. Think about the way you build your HTML in your page. You want to make reusable elements. You can also think when you are trying to make your style sheet the more maintainable. This is something you always think in a component way. So, how many people use jQuery here? jQuery plugins. You see? This is jQuery plugins is the way you are trying to think in a component way also. So what can we expect from this component? In fact, maybe it should be small component that will allow us to build like small button, small element, but we can imagine also why not to build a whole application with those components. But what we really expect from those components is to be reusable. I mean, when I use the component of someone else or when I create my own component, I will be able to use it in a lot of pages or even also in a lot of applications. And the fact also is I want this component to be encapsulated. I don't want this component, when I take the component of someone else, I want to be aware that it won't break my application. It will be a safe component. And last thing we expect from those components is to be extendable. I want to be able to take the component of someone else and to add some behavior on it. So, when we talk about web components, in fact, it's not a single standard, it's not a single API, it's in fact 4 specifications. Those 4 specifications are HTML import, shadow DOM, template, and custom element. And the good news about this specification is that they come from the W3C. So they are going to become standard. So we can use it, we don't have to be afraid of them. So let's see what there is in those 4 specifications. The first one is the HTML import specification. It's a simple way, in fact, to include an HTML element or an HTML page into another one. This is something you can do with JavaScript, you can do it with CSS, but you are not able to do it with HTML. I'm not talking about iframe or something like that. I'm talking about a real way to include an HTML element into another one. And this is a pretty good thing. It's really simple. Look at this. You just have to use a link tag, and you set the real attribute with the import value, and then you just have to set the path of the page you want to import. It's really simple. So, the specifications comes with a lot of good features. The first one is that they told us that it will be course enabled. I mean, I'm able to take in my page, to import a page from another domain, and this is pretty cool. Also, for a performance matter, I'm sure that when I'm making an import in my page, this import will be loaded only once. So I don't want to be aware of which page load which other page. I'm sure that the browser will load it only once. For performance also, the browser is going to load your imported page in the background. I mean, it won't block the page parsing. So this is pretty cool also. So, but what is important is that it's not a magic box, and the browser won't take the imported page and just cut it and paste it in your page. You have to play around, you have to play with it to get the content. Because in fact, HTML and CSS that will be in the imported page will just be available. So if you want to use it, you have to get it and to put it in your page. And to retrieve them, you have to use the import property. So here's a little example. You see I have my link tag here, where I make a reference to this file. And with JavaScript, I have to retrieve this link. I can access to the content with the import property, and then I can pick which element I want, and I can append it in my page. So, this is for HTML and CSS. For JavaScript, it's a little bit different. In fact, JavaScript is always running in the context of the main page. But the JavaScript can access the DOM of the main page, but it can access also the DOM of the imported page. So you can imagine something like this, where this block of script would be in the imported page, and can access to the DOM of this page with the document current script or no document, and it can also access to the main page with a document. So we can easily imagine that this JavaScript will be able to pick some element and to put it in the page. We have also some events to be aware when the load is over on if we have some error during the load. So it's really simple. You just have to add on the onload attribute and the onError attribute a reference to a method. and you can be aware of what is happening. So, how can we use HTML import in the modern browser? You can see for now that they are only available in Chrome and Firefox. And the interesting point is that for Internet Explorer, they are under consideration. So for now, there are only few support in the modern browser. Okay, let's jump to the next specification, and this one is really my favorite one. Who have already heard about Shadow DOM? Okay. In fact, Shadow DOM is something that is not, it's a little bit old because this is already the browser work to display you some nice input, for example. When you try to use the new HTML5 tag, you can see for input type range, date, or even also for the video tag, audio tag, you just use a single tag, but when you are looking at on the screen, you can easily imagine that the browser is using a lot of elements to display it. And the way he's doing this is by using Shadow DOM. So what is Shadow DOM? In fact, it's just about encapsulation. The idea, is to create an isolated container, and inside this container, you will be able to put the HTML you want, the style you want, and you are pretty sure that it is not gonna be seen by the page. It will be stay only, and it will be work only in your element. So when we try to play with this new specification, we have new nodes that appear in our DOM. The first one is a shadow root. This shadow root will be the element who will the base of your container, and the shadow host will be the element who will be hosting this container. So how did you create this shadow DOM? In fact, you have just a JavaScript method that you call on the element with calling create shadow root. And you also have this property shadow root to access to this shadow root. Here is an example. I have here two little buttons, and I will retrieve this one with the ID my button, and I will create a shadow root on it and change its text content. And when I display it in the browser, you will see that my button, the content of my button has already changed. So when we try dealing with Shadow DOM, there is a new concept that we have to deal with. In fact, here you can imagine that my element will have a Shadow DOM. But I also want, when I use it, to put some DOM inside. So we have now two kinds of DOM. The first one is a Shadow DOM that will be internal and that I can access. And there is also the light DOM that is a part of my visible tree, and I can use the API, HTML API on it. So the browser have to deal with those two kinds of DOM. And here is a new version that we call a composite DOM, and the browser will mix those two DOM to display it on the screen. So how the browser can know how to mix those two DOM? In fact, in Shadow DOM, you will be able to use insertion points. Those insertion points will allow you to define some area in the Shadow DOM, and you will tell the browser you can put this light DOM in this area. So here is an example, for example. In my div here, I create a Shadow DOM, and I had some HTML inside. But in my div, I also have some light DOM, and I want to display this light DOM into my Shadow DOM. So you can see here that I have a content area, content tag, with a select attribute, and I'm telling the browser that in this content tag, it will put all elements that have a class title. So in my example, it will be this span. And here I have a content with a joker on the select attribute, so the browser will take all the light DOM elements in this area. So you can believe me, you don't see it, but it's working. I can see the light DOM in my Shadow DOM. So again, for the support, you can see that it's only available in Chrome, and in Firefox, you can use it if you enable some flags. Okay, third specification, this one is the template. It is something we are used to do when we are using back-end template like JAD, or if you are using a JavaScript framework like Angular or Backbone or Ember, you are used to make some templating. But this specification allows you to to use HTML templating with a real tag. In fact, the important point with this templating is that they won't have side effect if you use it in your page, because for the browser, the DOM won't be rendered, the image won't load, and the script won't be parsed. So it is really something you put in your page to say, okay, I'm going to use it after. Don't take care of it. So how did you use it? You have some steps to respect. First, you have to retrieve the template with a CSS selector, and then you can access to its content using the content property. You have to clone the element you want to use, and then you insert it in your page. So if you look at this example, I have my template tag with some element inside, and then I just retrieve my template. I retrieve my image in my template, and I just set its CSS attribute. I retrieve my div, and I set its content, and then I clone the content, and I put it in my document. And here you can use the template. For the support, it's a little bit better. And the good news is that when I make that first this presentation in summer, the support was only in Chrome and Firefox with a flag. And now you can see that it's coming to be available in most browsers. Safari opened it in its last version, so it's pretty good news. Okay, and the last specification, this one is the most important if you want to create web component, because this one is the one that will give you the ability to rename your HTML element. You have the ability to create your own HTML element, and you also be able to extend existing HTML element. So this one is work with only one JavaScript method, which is called register element. This method takes two arguments. The first one is a name with a dash. That will be the name of your element. And the second one is a prototype, and by default, it will be an HTML element prototype. So here, for example, I'm telling the browser that I want to register an element called my element. You can see the dash that allows me to say that it's a custom element. And I give the HTML element prototype, which is the one by default. And then I can use it in my page. The browser will know that it is a custom element. So when I want to extend existing element, it's a little bit the same thing, but I just have to give the prototype of the element I want to extend, and I use the keyword extend here. So I can say to the browser that I'm create a custom element my button, which is extending the HTML button. And the difference is that I'm not use the my button name for the tag. I'm using the button name, and I just use a use attribute to tell the browser that it's not a simple button. This is important because when a browser that doesn't understand custom element will read this, he won't understand this, my button. But he will understand that it is a button. So you will keep the sort of behavior you want to have. When you are using custom element, you have to deal with two important things. Declaration versus register element. Because when you put an element, the tag in your page, the browser doesn't know how to deal with it until he receives the register information. So until he receives the register information, it will be a non-resolved element. And this is pretty nice because you also have a pseudo class, unresolved, that allow you to make some CSS rules on this element until it is registered. For example, here you can see that I have a little button and for an element, and the register will happen when I click this button. And I can make CSS rules that says that on the color is red, and when I register the element, you see that the rule is not applying anymore. We also have some callback that allow you to know what is happening with our custom element. We have the create callback to know that the element have been created and registered. We know that with the attach callback, the element have been put in the DOM, and the detach callback tells us that the element have been removed from the DOM. And we have also this callback that is pretty nice that allow us to know that attributes change on this custom element. So to use this callback, you just have to add the method to the prototype, and you put the code you want inside. And we are going to use this callback to add content, because For now, we just create some element with a name, and we put nothing inside. So to add content to our element, we can use a simple inner HTML method. So in the create callback, you just have to add some HTML inside your element. You can use the shadow DOM. So we start to see how those four specifications are going to work together with the create shadow root. And you also can use template and shadow DOM. You put the content of your element in a template. You retrieve this template, you create a shadow DOM, and you put the content of the template in this shadow DOM. To add code, it's pretty simple because you can access to the prototype. So you can put whatever you want, method, getter, setter. This is the behavior of your custom element. Okay, for the support. Again, it's only Chrome and Firefox with some flags. So, we saw the four specifications. In fact, they are real good specifications because you can use them. You can use a specification alone. You don't have to use them all. Think about it. For example, the import specification. Who is using Bootstrap here? Okay. You know that with Bootstrap, you have a lot of CSS, you have a lot of JavaScript file, and you always have to include it in your page. Can you imagine that with a Bootstrap HTML file, you will put all your dependencies inside, and you just have to import it in your. It would be really nice. But as you can see, there is a real weak support in our browser, so it's not really easy to use them now. So what can we do if we want to start working on web components? So there is a good jobs done by Polymer and Google, so I'm not going to talk a lot about because you are going to show them. But there is also other solutions. You can see Xtag from the Firefox team that use also web component qualified on a custom element and HTML import, and they give you also a set of elements so that you can start playing with it, and a core library. And there is also a Bosonic, a French framework that allow you to use web components now. You can find if you want to go deeper in the details of those specifications, I give you some links on my slide, and it's okay for me, and thank you.
Thank you, Cyril. Thanks. So who thinks it's simple? One person. You must be in the W3C. Reveal yourself. All right. Actually, Cyril does a really great job of explaining this standard, which is anything but simple. I think we all agree on that. And that's why it's nice to have libraries on top of the standard that actually makes the creation of components a little bit more manageable. I don't know how to register an element. I don't know how to load a template from a file that I have imported through JavaScript. And I can still do a nice UI using, for example, Polymer. Now, the important part to understand here is that Polymer has two layers. There is one layer that is just polyfills. So it implements all of that spec in a cross-browser way today, not tomorrow when the implementation will be there. It cannot do 100%, of course. If it could, there would be no need for a specification. But it does a good job of putting everyone on the same page. And then there is a second layer to Polymer, which is basically syntactic sugar for creating and using those Polymer elements. But since at the end of the day, when the syntactic sugar is gone, these are standard web components, it means that you can mix and match components on your page. That will be done with various frameworks. Polymer, you import something that is done with Xtag, and so on. This will work together because at the end of the day, when all of the fluff is resolved, those elements become web components, standard web components understood natively by your browser. Demo time. Let's see a demo. All right. So let's kill this. here I have a nice application, a blank canvas. Well, the main beauty about these components is that if I want to use one, paper card for instance, here I go, that's all I need to do. And I have a nice paper card here, which you recognize from the material design video. Actually, it already has a lot of behavior. If I hover over it, it comes to me. If I click on it, I can actually change how high it is. It has behavior built in. But it has more. For example, if I type heading equals hello world, well, it displays my hello world, but not just the text. It actually displays it with some styling. It's centered, it's bold, and so on. We'll see in a second how it does that. But more, Cyril told you about the light DOM. This is a tag, so I'm allowed to put stuff into it. What happens if I put an image into it? Avatar 8, for instance. Okay. Here is my image. But again, this image appeared in a given location with a given styling, actually it's a square image, of course, so I have rounded corners to make the circle and all of that. Wow, that looks like magic. Now, let's have a few more of those. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, I have more cards. Just before we dive into the way an element is created and why this magic works, let me show you a little trick. This is completely independent from components or whatever. It's a little piece of syntactic sugar that I love in Polymer. So let's put these elements into a div, like this. I need one more. And let me write this layout vertical center. Ooh, centered. What does this do? Let's try horizontal wrap. Ooh, horizontal and wrapped up. Let's try something else. On this one, and now you will understand what this does. Flex. So it's the second element. And now the second element takes all the horizontal space offered to it. What did I just do? I'm actually manipulating the flexbox here. Who knows about the flexbox specification in HTML? Well, everybody should be raising their hands. Flexbox is awesome. So Flexbox actually does not have this syntax. Flexbox is an HTML specification with its own syntax that allows you to specify basically UIs. Stuff like this whole thing goes to the top, and I want this element on the right, this on the left, and the middle element that takes all the remaining space. Things like that. Polymer makes it extremely simple to use the flexbox by allowing you to specify your flex layout simply as attributes on any tag. As soon as a tag has a layout attribute, it understands horizontal, vertical, center, wrap, and flex here to say that the second element is supposed to take all the space. All right, I close this parenthesis. This has nothing to do with web components, but it's a nice piece of Polymer syntactic sugar. Okay, how do we make those elements? That's super simple. Here is how Polymer elements are done. Slow motion. It's not as complicated as it looks. So this is the syntax that Polymer suggests to you to use for defining an element instead of going in JavaScript, registering your custom element, and so on. You start with the Polymer element tag, which has a name. The name must have, the name is the name of the tag you are defining. In my case, it's paper card. It must have a dash in the middle. All elements you create must have a dash in the middle. Elements are allowed to export a set of attributes. So this will be the external surface. That's very important when you are importing stuff, because this is your interaction surface with this element. Remember, the insides, all the stuff, the bubbles of the element are encapsulated, shadow DOM, and so on. So they don't permeate into your page. They are not going to break anything in your page. But it also means that you can't really access them. Well, not easily. This is HTML. There are always ways of cheating, even in the spec. But the, the proper way of doing it is to expose the attributes that you want your element to have in the attributes equals statement. And look here, I exposed my heading. That's what I did here. Heading equals hello world. I exposed it, and then inside of this element, I will be able to use it and place it somewhere. The definition element starts with a mandatory template tag, and then the somewhere is my shadow DOM. So this is in my element, all the HTML that is built, that builds this one element. And so, as you see, where does my heading go? Right there, H3 actually, sorry, here, H3 heading with those curly braces. Those curly braces tell you that the attribute that I have declared as a public attribute heading, this is where I want to inject it into my shadow DOM. It's data binding. We have also seen here that I can put stuff inside of my custom element. It's what Cyril called the light DOM. I need a syntax to be able to tell where that content goes in the actual element. So here it is, a content tag with the selector. Here I'm saying select all image tags from the light DOM. The light DOM is this here, the content of my custom element, and put them here in the actually rendered element. And then this is the default catch-all. Anything that has not been selected yet, put it at the end. Actually, I didn't show you that. Let me show you if I put more stuff here. More stuff. More stuff. Well, it displays more stuff. All right, what else? Data binding, we've talked about that. Actually, the paper shadow element that I'm using here is interesting. You noticed that my cards, they have this behavior, this little drop shadow. I did not actually implement that myself. I used a Polymer element called paper shadow, which is part of the paper elements toolkit. And I simply passed the depth Z of my card to it. It understands that. And that is what renders the little drop shadow. So it's an element that is rendering the drop shadow. I didn't have to do it myself. And finally, here at the end, you have a special script to call Polymer to register your element. The important thing also is that right there in the script, just after the name of your element, you have the actual prototype of your element. So that is where you can initialize your member values. That is where you can define your member functions if you want, for this element to have a given behavior in JavaScript. And sorry. That is also where you can define some set of predefined lifecycle functions, like for example attached. This one is predefined by Polymer. It will be called when this element is attached into your DOM, and you can define there what the function does. So that's about everything there is to know about those Polymer elements. Let's try to build a better application. So now I will use, what I did not show you yet is, of course, that to import this element into my page, I use the link rel import statement. Now I want to build an application that is slightly more complex. Let me import more stuff. Actually, here I'm importing a couple of Polymer paper elements. That's a library that you can get alongside Polymer that has UI elements built using the material design style I talked about earlier. So, what do I need? First, let's use a core header panel. Yeah, like this. Nice. Inside this panel, I want a toolbar. Core toolbar. Okay. Oops, sorry. What else? Well, let's try this already. And let's go back to vertical center. I prefer this. All right. I don't know why something is breaking there. Oh, that's my flex here, of course. In vertical, it doesn't mean anything. And let's get rid of this too. All right, what did I get? I got a nice piece of functionality, which means that I have a header that is not scrolling and an area below the header that is scrollable. Okay, let's populate this toolbar. Paper, icon, button, icon equals menu. So let's put a menu icon in there. All right, what else? Paper, input. Oh yes, I want an input field. Paper input with some label to tell the user what we want. Type your name here. Okay. And, oh yes, the floating action button. Yes, I want a floating action button to have a call for action. So paper floating action button. Icon equals cloud. All right, and just a div to have a title in my menu. Hello. So, how does my toolbar look like? It doesn't look so good, but it's but all the elements are there. All right, how do I make it look good? Oh, Flexbox. Actually, this core toolbar element, it is a Flexbox. So all I have to do is this. Now it looks like something. All right, here I have my application. Using, you don't know what it's doing yet. I'll tell you in a second what it's doing. Using paper elements, I actually like pretty much this one here. Look at the implementation of the input box. If I type Martin, if I release it. The paper elements, they have a pretty nice, sorry about that, paper elements sampler, a pretty nice set of interface elements that you can pick from using the material design principles, which is, for example, cool little animations like this. You've seen the input, but the input can be a lot more powerful. If you want validation, custom styling, This little, actually, have you seen this? Required. And so the label goes up to allow you to type something. There can be a special message formatted in red when the validation is wrong. What will it do? It will call a really fancy cloud service that when I type my name here, like Martin, and I hit the cloud button, it calls a server, and that server responds, "Hello, Martin," and I display that in a card. Ooh, fancy. At this point, I think you're sick of seeing me typing code, so let's switch to another branch to show you how this works. Sorry, I need to relaunch my server. Here, no, not this, but this. Here we go. So here is my application. I type Martin. I click on the button. Oh, it says hello, Martin. I type Jack. Click on the button. It says hello, Jack. How did I get the value of this input field here, and how did I create a card? Let's have a look at the code. For getting the value, actually, here is the code. Document query selector, so I get the input field and I call .value on it. Well, the magic of that is that it's exactly the same syntax that you would use with a bog standard input field in an HTML form. But this is not a bog standard input field. It's an input field built using web components with a complex behavior, a complex styling, CSS, and so on, that you just use as it was a normal input field. All right, now I take this value and I call my doCall function, which we'll call the server. What happens next? The server is called and does its magic, and when the data comes back, it calls my display new card function. Let's see how this one is implemented. And again, try to read the code if you want. This is bog standard HTML code for inserting a bog standard element into your DOM. Nothing to see here, really nothing to see. I do create element, paper card. It's a custom element, no one cares, create element works. I create the inside of the card, here just an image element, creating using a new image. I append the image. I can set the heading attribute by just calling card.heading equals whatever. And then I append my card into the content section of my application. That's it. You can manipulate those custom elements using exactly your normal JavaScript and put them somewhere. Now, what is the last thing missing? I have those crosses here. They're not functional. I would like to make them functional. I would like this to be a real application, kind of a model view controller application where I have a model which is a list of all the cards that I'm displaying, and I have a controller with functions on it like add a card, delete a card. You can actually do that in Polymer. Let me show you how. So now I'll switch to the last part of the code. Here we go. I have to restart my server again. Sorry. Let's reload. All right. This time, again, I type Martin. I have Martin. I type Jack. I have Jack. And if I want to close this one, boom, it's gone. So it works. The interesting part is how this is implemented. So let's go back to the code. Here, this is where I have inserted my cards previously. Now you see in place of my cards and a div containing them, I have this new element called greetings list. It's a custom-made element. Let's have a look at its implementation. So it's a Polymer element that exposes one attribute, which is list. Okay, that's just the name. What is this attribute? Let's go to the prototype. List is actually initialized as a JavaScript array. It's just an array. So this is getting interesting. In my elements, I have a list, which is a pure JavaScript array of stuff. The stuff here is the text in my card and the avatar ID to display the image. That's all there is to it. I created two functions, add and delete, here, to manipulate this list. This, for those of you who are extremely good at JavaScript, this is the simplest JavaScript you can imagine. Yeah, it's not simple, but it's the simplest JavaScript you can imagine for inserting an element, for adding an element to a list and deleting an element from a list. So don't try to read this code. It's just add an element to the list and kill one given element in the list. So that's my model. I know how to add and remove stuff from my model. Now, how do I make the magic happen to actually display this list of elements on the screen? Let's have a look at the template of this element. So I'm starting here with a normal template high-level tag, but inside, look at this. I have another template. This template using a data binding, which is an iterative data binding on the list element. It's template repeat for G in list, and please stamp out this little piece of HTML for each element you see in this list. And what am I stamping out? I'm stamping out paper cards. Paper cards initialized with values coming from the elements in the list. The little academic distinction between curly braces and square brackets for data binding. If you don't want to know about it, just use curly braces everywhere. Curly braces create two-way data binding. So there is also an observing mechanism for observing when the value changes and updating what needs to be updated. If you don't need that, if you just need to inject the value, square brackets, that's a one-way data binding. Just put the value here. Okay? It's slightly more efficient. There are more event handlers that are generated, but you don't have to care. All right, and that's it. So here in my application, to manipulate my UI, I simply have a JavaScript array of cards. When I delete something from the JavaScript array, boom, it actually disappears from the screen. So the way I have implemented this little cross is simply by calling the greetings list dot delete of the ID of the card. To recap my list here, that's my model. The functions to manipulate the model, that's usually called your controller. And the template code to display the model on the screen, that's usually called your view. All right. And that's everything I wanted to show you about Polymer today. Thank you. We still have time for questions. Or simply come down to ask the questions and stick with us.
Tu rivalises pas avec l'heure du repas.
I guess you are more hungry than you have questions. Have a good lunch. Thank you.
Ah, tu vois, j'aurais pu avoir 5 minutes de plus.